So everybody, let's start by sitting comfortably, like you would for meditation, and either, sitting cross-legged on a chair or on the couch or on the floor. And hold on just a minute. And or sitting on the chair with your feet on the floor. Don't want to be lying down. You do want to be sitting up. And let's close our eyes. And we're going to just begin with breathing. And I want you to just breathe very easily and in a very receptive sort of way. And take a deep inhale, receive an inhale. And then as you exhale, offer it back without any sort of focus or anything. Let's just take a few breaths, nice and deep, but not forcing. Inhale, receiving the inhale, a gift from Gaia, a gift from the universe. And as we exhale, we offer it back with gratitude to Source. And just allow your awareness to rest on your breathing. And let it find its own speed. As we just bring our focus to it, you'll find automatically your breathing will begin to slow down and get a little deeper. And on each out-breath, feel that you're letting go. Letting go of anything that you were dealing with this morning, anything that came up during the night, anything that's not of this moment, right here, right now. Becoming very present to this moment, just with the breathing. And now we're going to use our breath. We're going to ride our breath into the Sushumna. So we're going to be a little more focused. I want you to breathe so deeply you breathe all the way down into the back of the pelvic area. And as you exhale, let go of any tension, especially at the connection between your legs and your hips, that hip flexor area. Let go of any tension there, and you'll find your legs will totally relax. So do a few breaths like this. Consciously breathing deeply down into the base of the spine, into the back of the pelvis. And exhale any tension, any tightness, any story. And allow the breath to flow as easily and deeply as it will. And on the next breath, inhale into the base and the back of the spine. And then as you continue to inhale, bring your awareness up to the back of the rib cage, into your where your kidneys are. And as you exhale, release the back of the heart, drop your shoulders, and let go down at the base of the spine, all at the same time. And a few breaths like this, into the lower back, the base of the spine, up into the middle of the back, into the kidneys, and then exhale. Release any tension across the back of the heart, dropping the shoulders straight down, dropping the elbows, and letting go. And do a few more breaths like this. Inhaling deeply into the base of the spine, back of the pelvis, into the kidneys, and exhaling, releasing down through the pelvis, back of the heart, dropping the shoulders. And on the next exhale, allow yourself to feel the connection. It's already there between the base of your spine, the base of your Sushumna, and our Mother Gaia. Allow your awareness to feel the connection from the root all the way through all the layers of the surface, the mantle, the crust, all the way down into the center, to the heart of Gaia, that iron crystal at the center of the planet. She's our mother, and just as we were connected through the umbilical cord to our physical mother, we're connected energetically through this umbilical cord to our Mother Gaia. And resting in that nurturing, stabilizing, relaxing awareness that comes through that connection, I want you to now see your spine, look inwardly at your spine, and imagine that there is a set of lungs in each vertebrae all the way up the spine. And I want you to now breathe into each of those sets of lungs at each vertebrae. So inhale, and you find they'll happen kind of spontaneously, all in a sequence. Inhale into each set of lungs, and they expand out to the side, to the back, and to the front in all directions. And as you exhale, drop everything on the outside of the body, the chest, the back, the shoulders, and you'll feel a spontaneous lengthening in the center of the body. Use this image to breathe into the Sushumna. And as you open each of those sets of lungs in the vertebrae, open the wings at the back of your neck. Open the wings at the back of the base of your skull. And as you exhale, gently let everything drop down as it rests, and allow your awareness to move right into the cave of Brahman with the awareness of the entire spine, the entire Sushumna, and that connection all the way to the center of Gaia. So let's breathe into that. And you may find quite spontaneously that the crown chakra begins to open, because you know the Sushumna is known as the eighth ray of the sun. it's connected not only to the sun of our solar system, it's connected to the great central sun at the center of this galaxy, the center of the universe even. It's already there. So that entire Sushumna from the center of the galaxy, the center of the universe, through us and to the center of our planet is one river of stars connecting all of us. So breathe into that vastness. And let yourself feel supported and nurtured by our cosmic connection, our connection into Gaia, and feel our oneness with both aspects of ourselves. Just as 70% of Gaia's surface is water, a large percent of our body, not quite 70%, but a large percent of our body is water. The elements that make up the fabric of her creation are the same elements that make up the fabric of our creation, are the same elements that make up the fabric of the cosmic creation. It is the oneness. We are the oneness. She is the oneness. And then take one more breath very consciously all the way through the expanse of our Gaia connection, our Sushumna, as it expands in both directions. And then one final letting go, feeling completely centered and aligned along the Sushumna, bowing to our connection with our mother, bowing to our connection with the vastness, the Father Principle. And then begin to come back and slowly open your eyes. And allow yourself to keep this connection as we go through this journey with Kathy, this journey of Earth Shakti rising. As her Shakti rises, so does ours. And you might want to take a little stretch just to come back a bit more into your body. And then over to you, Brad, to introduce Kathy.
Hi, everybody. Kathy Stanley has been a student of Leslie's and Corlight's for the past 20 years. Originally from Jamaica, she lived in Toronto, Canada for many years before moving to Portland, Oregon in 2005. Kathy completed Corlight's teacher training in 2001 and was ordained as a Corlight minister in 2008. Kathy recently completed her master's degree, and she has a private practice as a spiritual counselor where she supports people in their spiritual journeys. She also offers ecotherapeutic practices and workshops that help build eco-resilience. Kathy teaches ecopsychology and other eco-literacy classes at Sophia University. Her website is at sacredwomenwisdom.com. Kathy, we're so grateful to have you with us. Thank you so much. Please take it away.
Okay, good. Well, I'm so excited to be able to share this material with you. And so thank you for the opportunity. And first, I would like to say a few words about the photographer whose wildlife photos I am featuring in this presentation. His photography is iconic, and his pictures are very much like paintings. Many people have said that, and you said that earlier, Brad. I first saw his work about 8 years ago, and I was struck by his ability to capture the essence and the soul in his subjects. And when I sit with his photographs, I am transported into that African dream time that Leslie has talked so much about and given many of us the blessing to experience. As a photographer, Nick Brandt embodies the values of deep ecology and ecopsychology that I'll be talking about. He uses no telephoto lens because he says he wants to see as much of the sky and landscape as possible along with the wildlife. And he says, and these are his words, to me, every creature, human or non-human, has an equal right to live. And this feeling, this belief that every animal and I are equal affects me every time I frame an animal in my camera. So that statement alone is a statement of deep ecology, that we are all equal with all the other species on the earth. So his work as a photographer and his intimate relationship with the East African wildlife has also resulted in an amazing example of sacred activism that we've talked about here in Core Light. And of course, Seeds of Light is a beautiful example of sacred activism. So Nick was despondent back in 2009 at the plight of what's been happening with the elephant poaching in East Africa and, of course, all over Africa. And in 2010, Nick joined with Richard Bonham, a conservationist, and they started the Big Life Foundation. And their vision was to establish a successful holistic conservation model in the Amboseli-Tsavo ecosystem that could be replicated across the African continent. And they are successful. They're the only organization in East Africa that has coordinated anti-poaching teams operating on both sides of the Kenya-Tanzania border. And they use a model of sustainable conservation that's community-based and collaborative. So in 4 short years, they now protect 2 million acres of wilderness. They have 315 rangers, and their rangers have made 1,400 arrests and confiscated over 3,000 weapons. So the Amboseli-Tsavo ecosystem is now a lot safer for our beloved elephants as a result of this work. So from art to activism. So I want to start with an invocation. We ask for the presence of the Spirit of Gaia and pray that the breath of life continues to caress this planet home. Fill each of us with love for our true self, which includes all of the creatures and plants and landscapes of the world. May we all awaken to our true and only nature, none other than the nature of Gaia, this living planet Earth. So I'd just like to let you know how I came to this work. 22 years ago, I read this slim volume of a book that sang to my soul's love for animals and the earth, Thinking Like a Mountain Towards a Council of All Beings, by John Seed and Joanna Macy. It's a classic text in deep ecology, which is the philosophy that places humans as just one strand within the interconnected web of life on Earth. And this little book continues to inspire me with its lessons in communion with nature and living on the earth with a reverence and sensitivity to all life around us. I call it my Bible. I felt an intimate kinship with animals from childhood, and it has been in the presence of animals and wild places in nature where I have felt the most joy and connection with life, and where I have felt so much personal transformation and acceleration of my spiritual growth. I say Gaia, is the great earth goddess, has been my primary spiritual guide. And in 2000, I went to South Africa with Leslie and Corlight, and that was a pivotal awakening experience for me. And the following year, 2001, I went to East Africa, to Tanzania, and I had a peak experience in the Serengeti, and I made a deep commitment and surrender to the earth. I remember the vast love that I felt there, and I said, I belong to you, I work for you, show me the way. And since then, I felt guided by Spirit to go back to school, and I just graduated after 3 deeply transformational years in graduate school with my master's degree in women's spirituality. And for my thesis, I created a syllabus for a 10-week class in ecopsychology and spiritual ecology, with the goal of helping people to cultivate a richer, deeply personal, intimate and connected relationship with the earth. And I call the work Earth Shakti Rising, in recognition that the Earth Shakti, her power and energy, is rising within us as we strive as a species to rekindle our relationship with her and bring ourselves back into balance and sustainability with her biosphere. So this presentation that you're seeing is an overview of my 10-week class in ecopsychology, which I'm currently teaching for Sophia University. And I want to say that for those people who may be looking at a PDF version on Caucus, you're not getting the whole presentation. I will make a new PDF of this presentation, and I will be posting some resources on Caucus as well later today. So this is just an introduction of some of the topics I'll be covering, some of the background influences to ecopsychology, the environmental movement, the counterculture movement, deep ecology, native wisdom traditions, women's spirituality or feminist spirituality, ecofeminism, Gaia theory, biophilia. All of these supported the emergence of ecopsychology in the early 90s. And then I'll also talk about the current orientations of ecopsychology, the ecological unconscious, phenomenology, transpersonal ecopsych, interconnectedness of all beings, and how ecopsychology is being used in clinical work. We call it ecotherapy. And of course, the transcendental, how experiences in nature lead to transcendental experiences and knowledge. And that's a part of transpersonal ecopsychology. But I'm going to begin with Rachel Carson, because she really is, I say she's the ancestor voice that continues to reverberate today in the environmental and ecopsychology fields. Her work, her book, Silent Spring, which was published in 1962, was a groundbreaking work which called for action against the use of pesticides. And she warned against the industrial corporate forces that had the power to destroy nature, and that she warned this would ultimately destroy us. And she was pointing the way towards the eventual emergence of ecopsychology, because she linked the mastery of ourselves and her implication that We are not mature enough to be humble and recognize that we are only one species in a large universe. And her writings about the dangers of industrial toxins are as relevant and even more meaningful than they were 50 years ago. So now we move into the early 70s with the emergence of deep ecology, which its central premise revolves around the view that anthropocentrism is the root cause of our environmental problems, and anthropocentrism is that little image that you see is that depicts what anthropocentrism means, that humans are on top of all of the other species. So deep ecology said, no, that's not right. It called for a radical restructuring of the Western cultural and scientific stance of placing humans at the top of a pyramid in domination of all other species. So instead, they called for us to see ourselves as that one strand within the interconnected web of life on Earth, an echo of what the ancient Earth wisdom of native peoples tells us. And one quote is that we are but a playing member of the biotic community. So Arne Naess coined this term of the ecological self, which emerges when the boundaries between ourselves and the other species and the Earth dissolve. And they said we can cultivate our ecological selves with rituals and connective practices with Earth, with meditation, breath work, and somatic practices that open our bodies to feel in the oneness with all creation. And another element of tapping into that ecological self is to move into what Joanna Macy calls deep time, remembering our evolutionary journey on the Earth, which allows us to reflect on our shared ancestry with all life. A third of our genes we share with trees. I mean, we share ancestry with all life on Earth. It's incredible. We forget that. And so I love this quote from John Seed, who said, "I try to remember it is not me trying to protect the rainforest. Rather, I am part of the rainforest protecting itself. I am that part of the rainforest recently emerged into human thinking." Sorry. So Arne Naess, who coined that term, ecological self, called for there to be community therapy around deep ecology issues. And Joanna Macy and John Seed developed deep ecology workshops that allowed for exploration of the ecological self. And these rituals began in the 70s and the early 80s. And they came up with this beautiful ritual called the Council of All Beings, and which has several components to it. One being allowing for us to honor and acknowledge our grief over what's happening to the natural world. So they called it despair and empowerment, so that we can process and have a place to honor and acknowledge our grief. Because a lot of that is repressed in the culture, and there isn't space given to it. And then another element is what I mentioned before, the evolutionary remembering to connect into deep time, into our 4 billion year evolutionary journey on Earth. And then the actual Council of All Beings, allowing ourselves to be chosen and speaking on behalf of those who have no voice that is heard in human circles. And Joanna Macy now trains facilitators to conduct what she calls the work that reconnects. And her book, Active Hope, is one of the books I'll put on a recommended reading list for anyone who's interested. It's a fantastic book. It's a book that I use in as a textbook in one of my classes. So this is some of the history of what we're seeing, now with moving into these circles where we need to talk about what's happening ecologically. There's a history to this, and there's a whole framework for it, which is beautiful and has been modeled in thousands of instances. So I like this little diagram, which just shows the different approaches to, what the dominant worldview has been versus, the new paradigm. So, the old scientific model saying that Earth is dead, an inert thing. Well, we know that's not right. Earth is a living being. So we're definitely moving from that old paradigm into the new paradigm. And some of the deep ecology principles that I see happening in the world, Bolivia enacted into their constitution 11 new rights for nature. They call it the law of Mother Earth. And so, for example, one of those rights is the right to not be affected by mega infrastructure and development projects that affect the balance of ecosystems and the local inhabitant communities. And there was a proposal to the United Nations for a universal declaration of planetary rights. Polly Higgins is a wonderful environmental lawyer, and she's doing incredible work. She right now has a campaign to end, to make ecocide a crime. So, and just recently I was in Boulder, Colorado, and I saw that there is a group there called the Boulder Rights of Nature group. A group of citizen activists, and they define themselves as united in our belief in the importance of rights for nature. So this is happening, this is all part of the good news, is the awakening that's taking place, I call it, this is part of the Earth Shakti rising. So concurrent with deep ecology in the 70s, ecofeminism also came on stream. And the basic premise of that was that our ecological problems stem from the domination and oppression of women and nature by men. So ecofeminists point out that, some environmentalists were also blind to their own patriarchal assumptions, because they had to take into account also the connections between the domination of women and the domination of nature. These things are linked. So I like this quote from Betty Rozak: ecofeminism rejects the outmoded dualism of the scientific mode in favor of a sense of unity with all living things, for a worldview that emphasizes process, dynamic change, and the interrelatedness of all beings. Ecofeminism and ecopsychology both point the way beyond dualism and its either-or reductionisms. An ecological consciousness sees nature as alive, active, and capable of communicating with us. This insight carries us further to a sense of the sacred within nature. And there's a beautiful quote by ecofeminist Vandana Shiva, whose work, she's just doing such incredible work. She's a physicist, and she's a anti-GMO activist in India, and just one of our great divine feminine models in the world. So also in women's spirituality in the 1970s directly challenged the disengagement from nature in Western society and the alienation from nature and privileging of intellect over body, which was inherent in patriarchal religious teachings. So women's spirituality, pointed out that, and others have too, but if your whole religious orientation is salvation, which is off planet, if your God is off planet, then there's not much motivation for you here to, keep this earth in a pristine state. Because why are you going to bother if everything that you're doing is working towards just getting off planet? So that is the critique, And the women's spirituality movement empowered women in reclaiming a spirituality that recognized the sacredness of the female body and in an embodied spirituality. So some women chose to celebrate the goddess as a symbol of their own connection to divinity. And this was a new spirituality that is new to the modern era, that revered and honored the female body, women's psyche, women's experiences and paths to knowledge, interconnection with all life and with the earth, and reclamation of the importance of natural cycles and rhythms of the earth was emphasized, along with rituals that supported connecting with earth, spirit, and all life. And that last point about the importance of natural cycles and rhythms of the earth is so important. And I think here in Corelight we know all of this, but I'm just giving some background as to the influences into the emerging ecopsychology. So biophilia is also another influence on ecopsychology. E.O. Wilson is a Harvard biologist, and he came up with this biophilia theory, which said that humans have an innate need for connection with nature. And so this theory informs, and it seems almost, like we should take that for granted, but in a culture that's, that has been estranged from nature, I think these theories are important that give support for people to say, we actually really do need to be in nature to support us physically, mentally, spiritually, emotionally. So biophilia supports that. And out of biophilia has come biophilic design, which is now influencing architecture. So if you notice when you go to many hospitals and so on today, you'll see that there are a lot more pictures of, nature and so on. And there have been studies that show that if you are in a hospital and you are in a room that has a view onto nature, you're going to heal much more quickly than someone that did not have a view. So there's a lot of empirical studies being done now about this, and so this is some of what biophilia is influencing. And nature deficit disorder, Richard Louv talks about the lack of vitamin N, vitamin nature, and he talks about, the more high-tech our lives become, the more nature we need to achieve natural balance. And so biophilia is supporting that turn back towards nature that we're seeing in conservation psychology, in environmental psychology. And then Gaia theory also, which states that Earth is a self-regulating system made up from the totality of organisms, the surface rocks, the ocean, and the atmosphere tightly coupled as an evolving system. And regulation of surface conditions so as always to be as favorable as possible for contemporary life. So Gaia theory, James Lovelock says Gaia theory demotes us from ownership of the earth to be one of many animal species. So it still allows us to be important and powerful, but the earth can proceed without us. And so this was also an important theory that supported the emergence of ecopsychology. So in 1992, Theodore Roszak, who was a cultural historian, he just passed away 2 years ago. He lived in the Bay Area. He's the man who coined the term counterculture back in the late 60s, and he taught at the University of California. And he introduced the concept of ecopsychology. And ecopsychology arose out of the realization that the ecology and environmental movements needed the input of psychology in order to make sense of humanity's relationship with the environment. And it critiqued psychology, saying that psychology needed to recognize that humanity's psychological health was absolutely linked with what was going on in the environment. So there was really a need to understand the psychopathology, need to understand motivations and lack of understanding in the ecological ramifications that was causing us to wreck the environment. So he called for a psychological impact statement for the environmental movement. So some of what ecopsychology recognized was that if you want to change human behavior, you have to get to people through their hearts. Theodore Roszak noted that shocking and shaming the public is not a winning strategy for the environmental movement. He said that if you start from the assumption that people are greedy brutes and the tone of all you say, then the tone of all you say will be one of contempt. And he says if you assume that people are self-destructively stupid, your tactics are apt to become overbearing at best and dictatorial at worst. And then for those on the receiving end of those assumptions, shame has always been among the most, unpredictable motivations, and it slides into resentment. So if you call someone's entire way of life into question, what you're apt to produce is defensive rigidity. So he said it is elementary psychology that those who wish to change the world for the better should not begin by vilifying the public they seek to persuade, or by confronting it with a task that appears impossible. So we have to recognize that there are emotional forces behind bad environmental habits. So, for example, a shopping addiction. People are hungering for something. People feel hunger for something, and they fill it with, going to the mall. What if we encourage people to go and spend more time in nature, connect with nature instead, get re-enchanted with nature? This is some of what ecopsychology is saying. And we should assume that we each have a deep, abiding connection between our psyche and Gaia. So instead of vilifying people, recognize what's happening. We've been in this culture for a few hundred years now that has said that the earth is dead. we have to move away from shaming people when all they've known is one certain way of being. So the new role that environmental activists can take, other than grieving green, is to be healers rather than hecklers. So healers meaning bringing back people to feel their connection with the earth, because there's a saying, and I forget the quote who it's from, that people will not save what they do not love. And so Ecopsych says psyche is rooted inside the psyche of the earth herself. And Roszak said, let the you become the earth and all her fellow creatures upon it. So the ecological unconscious is another term that Roszak came up with, and it extends Jung's notion of the collective unconscious to include the breadth of ecological knowledge that we share with all life on the planet. And so he said it's through the ecological unconscious that we may begin to hear the voice of the earth. And our sympathetic bond with the natural world, the ecological unconscious, is a defining feature of human nature, the one aspect of consciousness that has been cruelly repressed by urban industrial culture. So freeing the ecological unconscious may be the key to sanity in our time. So I see as, strong correlations between animal communication and the ecopsych deep ecology concepts of the ecological self and the ecological unconscious. And it's my contention that animal communicators have opened their ability to deeply connect with the ecological self and with the ecological unconscious that links all of us humans with other species and with all other life on the planet. This is our birthright. So phenomenology is direct experience of something. So David Abram wrote a pivotal book in ecopsychology called The Spell of the Sensuous, and he asked why his Western civilization developed at the expense of planetary ecological destruction. And his thesis was that development of phonetic writing led humans in the Western world to be severed from the intimate animistic relationship with the environment that has allowed indigenous peoples to live in a more sustainable way with nature. So, Western world speaks about the world, and indigenous peoples speak to the world. And if anyone has seen that incredible film, Wisdom Keepers, and I know some people in Santa Fe at least have seen it, and I just saw it last weekend, and it is absolutely beautiful film about the Pacos in South America, and it's such a lesson for all of us to get back to that animistic relationship. So David Abram really encouraged that we open our sensorial interactions with the world. He says it is only at the scale of our direct sensory interactions with the land around us that we can appropriately notice and respond to the immediate needs of the living world. So this is something that in ecopsychology we encourage so much, is for people to sink into their places in nature, wherever is special, even just one's own backyard, and to open ourselves fully with all of our senses to what's happening around us. This will inform us being able to hear the voice of the earth. So the ecological self may be considered to be a spiritual concept similar in scope to other non-dual and transpersonal concepts that encourage exploring the self beyond the self through meditation and other modalities. So it's just another way of framing it. And of course, we here in Corelight know about non-duality because Leslie is a teacher of non-duality, so we've been blessed with these teachings. So John Davis says a transpersonal understanding that is sensitive to the earth recognizes that direct contact with nature, wherever it is encountered, in the backyard, garden, wilderness, or one's body, expands and develops one's maturity beyond the personal and supports self-transcendence. It also recognizes spirit in all forms, including the natural, the built, the wounded, the sublime, and the toxic. So spiritual ecology is another term for, what one writer calls the quiet revolution that's taking place in the world. Ecopsychology and spiritual ecology are pointing to this desired outcome of a renewal of the sacred human-nature relationship. And of course, the first spiritual ecologists were indigenous people. Theodore Roszak, our granddaddy of the ecopsychology movement, privileged the animistic worldview and made many references to a spiritual relationship with nature, although he did not explicitly use that term. And an early voice in spiritual ecology was Thomas Berry, and he articulated the urgent need to turn away from the destructive forces of industrialization and drew attention to what he called the great work before us, moving humanity into an era where we live in sustainable, harmonious relationship with the earth. And I think maybe all of you, or I know at least some of you, have seen that film, The Journey of the Universe, The New Cosmology with Brian Swimme. He worked closely with Thomas Berry and talks about, the new story. We need a new story. So The Journey of the Universe is just a marvelous film, And another writer on spiritual ecology, K. Lauren DeBoer, talks about having a practice of spiritual ecology that includes stillness, opening to nature, and working through our anger towards what is happening to the world. The great work, based on the story of life's unfolding, moves us away from a preoccupation with the self into the larger ecological self of the Earth community. And he says this movement has deep implications for our psychological healing, awakening in us a sense of both awe and belonging. And that's the whole focus of EcoPsych, is can we bring people back to that feeling of awe and belonging in nature. Living in awe of life's creative powers and the unfolding story addresses that deep-seated alienation that has permeated the Western psyche, creating the illusion that Earth is nothing more than a storehouse of resources for human use. So ecotherapy is applied ecopsychology. How is it being used? So I've talked about the ecological self, and along with that, another term for that is environmental identity work. So helping people to open to that ecological self. So one of the ways that we do that is suggesting that people have a practice where they go to a special place in nature, can be just their backyard, daily or weekly. For my classes, I say to my students, it's an assignment that they have to do at least once a week, is go to the same place in nature and open their senses, spend at least half an hour to an hour. And this is not necessarily meditation. This is about opening the senses and being aware of everything that's around, and how do things change from week to week. What do you notice? This is about establishing a relationship with a place. We call it place attachment. And some psychologists say that psychological damage is caused by loss of place attachment in modern urban and corporate life. So when people relocate every few years or rush through their vacation travel without experiencing silence or rootedness or ritual and belonging, or experience regular life trapped in the daily rush of commuting to work and back, how is it possible to experience belonging to one's place? Living as a tourist makes it difficult to develop concern and responsibility for one's environment. That's why ecotherapists and ecopsychologists say that one feature of sustainability will be immersion in the particulars of a place. When people participate fully in the geography and community of a particular place, they are more likely to feel accountable for its health and find ways to protect it. And of course, doing meditation in our special places is good as well, and mindfulness, but this is more about the establishment of becoming rooted and attached to a place. So some of the other applications: wilderness therapy, nature therapy with troubled youth in wilderness settings. I think that's really gaining in use. There's a lot of that going on right now, wilderness therapy. Animal-assisted therapies, that's also increasing in use. If you've been on a plane recently, you may have been on a plane with a dog who is a therapy dog, because I'm seeing so many more of them now. And, therapy dogs are being used in hospitals and nursing homes and with autistic children. And this is all part of ecotherapy, And we are blessed to be able to have these animals who can assist us in our healing. Equine therapy is another very potent, deep psychological healing modality. Is healing that's assisted by horses. Horticultural therapy, community gardening. There's studies now that say that even if you have your hands in soil just for 20 minutes, you can alleviate anxiety and depression. So gardening is a very therapeutic, and I'm sure we have many people here at Corlight, and I know Leslie for sure, who will attest to the healing qualities for therapy, for gardening. So voluntary simplicity practices, revival of shamanic and earth-centered rituals, integrating shamanic elements in psychotherapy. So these are all part of what's happening in the ecotherapy world, and there are others too. So I say, if we are to move into a more peaceful, respectful, and sustainable relationship with the earth, with each other, and with other species, then imagining our interconnection and cultivating expansion into our ecological self may be a valuable step to bridge the gaps that cause division. So I want to move into what ecopsychology has to say about climate change and climate change denial. And these next two slides are from a YouTube presentation that I'm going to put up as a link on the Ecopsychology resources that I'll give you for caucus. And I highly suggest that everyone take a look at it. It's called The Psychology of Climate Change Denial, and it's by Dr. Craig Chalquist, who I'm studying with right now. He's a prominent eco-psychologist in the Bay Area, as well as a depth psychologist. And I'm in a class with him right now, and I'm using his work as well in my university class that I'm teaching. So some of the defenses against climate change awareness, I think we can all relate to some of these. Denial, just outright deny. We see that happening, people just deny that climate change is happening. And then lying and brainwashing, well, fossil fuel industry is, they're all into brainwashing. And repression of a sense of shared responsibility. So people not realizing that their actions, also affect the actions of, what's happening on the earth or what's happening, in other places. Mechanical thinking, that goes back to, that old scientific view that, the earth is dead, that we're just a collection of, objects that don't affect each other. And that goes into ignorance of systemic processes. Distraction and numbing, and conscious or unconscious wish for collapse. Unconscious self-destruct setup, and we could see that people, and perhaps all of us have had these instances where we have to excavate what's happening in our psyche, to go deep into the shadow to understand why we repeat some of our self-destructive patterns, so that can be unconscious. And devaluation of nature as feminine. So the eco-feminine thesis that, patriarchy is responsible for ecological damage. Rebellion against authority. So we can see that, just recently when President Obama announced some new guidelines for coal plants, and one of the things that came out in the news is these people who are fitting their trucks with, I guess these, I don't even know what the word is, I forget what they're called, but their trucks are blowing out a lot more exhaust, and it's like they're saying, well, the president is saying we need to do something, so we're going to totally rebel against it, And then techno-redemption is where, if we think that technology is going to save us completely, that's a defense. So the eco-psychology prescription for shifting denial into a place of, moving more into action and hopefulness. We have to present productive alternatives to doom and stop indulging in green puritanism, which is what I talked about earlier with Theodore Roszak, talking about the environmentalists shocking and shaming people. That doesn't work. Don't shame the public. It's totally ineffective. Empathize with what's under the denial and provide safe places, circles for discussion, because receiving devastating news can lead to numbing. And move from scarcity to abundance thinking. Offer education in ecosystems thinking, connect people with resources and networks, model appreciation and connection with nature, and envision living well on Earth after this rite of passage, because it is a rite of passage that the Earth is in, and we are with her on it. So building eco-resiliency for a sustainable future. This is what psychologists Susan Koger and Deborah Dunan-Winter have to say about it. An important psychological approach to building a sustainable society is to keep positive visions of the future in focus and to work diligently on making them happen. The importance of providing positive images flows directly from psychoanalytic psychology. With positive images of the future, people can direct more energy toward changing behaviors that enable accomplishments, and use less of it defending against negative feelings such as anxiety. So any psychologically sophisticated approach to environmental problems must include ways of protecting people from overload and despair. Hope is a crucial psychological commodity for building a sustainable future, as it is for emotional intelligence in general. This is an exercise it's an assignment that I give to my students to visualize an ecologically healthy world. So I have them write a paper with these instructions. Imagine that things had turned around in the 21st century for the planet. A positive revolution in consciousness has taken place, and humanity has evolved and now lives sustainably on the earth. What are things like 7 generations from now? What did people do in 2014 and beyond to create the conditions for this positive change in consciousness? So I titled this From Descent to Renewal, because this rite of passage that Gaia is on, she is definitely in a descent phase. However, we know from the cycles of nature that there is always rebirth and renewal that comes after descent. Spring follows winter. Summer follows spring. We go through these cycles. So I see signs of the new story emerging. And these are just a few. You guys probably have a whole lot more. But resacralizing of the earth is happening. And it's happening with us. It's happening with many spiritual groups around the world, with many religions in the world. Yale University now has a program, a graduate program in ecology and religion. They're blending ecology and religion. And they're studying how religions around the world are resacralizing the earth. That's a sign of the new story. Relational reality and systems thinking emerging. Relational reality is a term from Charlene Spretnak, who is a wonderful ecofeminist cultural historian. And she wrote a book that I'm going to put on the recommended reading list. And her book is titled Relational Reality: New Discoveries of Interrelatedness That Are Transforming the Modern World. And she talks about, integrative medicine, new architecture design, biophilic design, things that are happening in education, community design, the economy. These are all developments that are happening that are based in our interrelatedness, based in systems thinking, as opposed to the old scientific model. So that's, to me, all new signs of the new story emerging. Biophilic design, biomimicry, people using nature as a guide as how to design different things. Community-based economics, farmers markets, don't we see that everywhere? At least here in Portland, I think I can go to a farmer's market every day of the week and not have to drive or go more than a few miles. The rise of alternative energy sources, recycling. Just think back maybe 30 years, we didn't have all of this recycling, which everybody is doing now. The rise of ecology, eco-psychology, deep ecology, ecofeminism, environmental activism, social justice, all of these things are happening. Holding eco-destroyers accountable, reconnection with nature, the children in nature movement. Richard Louv, who I mentioned before, and I'll put his books also on the reading list. He has started this fantastic children and nature movement, which is getting children back out into nature. Sustainability initiatives, recognition of animal personhood. Well, we know all about that here in Corlight. We are all into animal personhood, I think. Encounter with the holy as immanent and earthly. And I love this quote from Craig Chalquist. He said about this new story emerging, he said, the deity awaiting recognition was Earth. I'm going to leave you with this beautiful poem from Wendell Berry, The Peace of Wild Things. When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound, in fear of what my life and my children's lives may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water, and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought of grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time I rest in the grace of the world and am free. So that's my presentation. Thank you for listening. And I welcome any questions or thoughts.
Kathy,
We're all in tears right now.
Yes, we are all, I can just feel we're all deeply, deeply affected by this. I, all I can say is a very profound thank you from the bottom of my heart for this presentation. It is so beautiful and such a perfect reminder,
yes,
for what we need to keep in our hearts at all
yes,
times,
yes,
and remember every day, and take in our remembering, take steps forward, little ones if necessary, gaining ground, getting bigger as
right,
time goes by, that we will always remember and hold space,
yes,
prayer and meditation for the wild things and the animals and the wilderness, that
yes,
there may be a resurgence and that all of it is not destroyed, but from that whatever remains when this ugliness in the world comes to an end, that we may be able to restore
yes,
those damaged places,
right,
because of our heart and souls that we locked down into the beauty and carried it inside us.
yes. Blessed be.
Mm, mm. I'm just all tearing up now. Somebody else has to speak. Oh my. Mm.
Yeah, me too. Yeah.
Kathy, would you like to take some questions, and we
Sure.
can see if people want to share?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, Brad, you're the first.
Kathy, if you could recommend just one thing that everybody listening to this call could do, what would it be?
Well, I would love for us to do our visualizations. So I've come back to this screen with the, to hold our visions for the world. So in addition to having our own practices of connecting with the earth, in a special place or even in our gardens or in a park or whatever, doing our mindfulness, sinking into those places, opening our senses so that we hear the voice of the earth within us. That's one thing, along with holding this vision that we can create, because Gaia she's speaking through us, so we each have our part, I believe, in this whole adventure. And so following our hearts as to how we're being guided by her in this journey with her. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does. And something comes up for me here to suggest for us as a group. Maybe we can all do our visualizations and write about them so that we can share them with each other by posting them on Caucus. It feels like an important collaboration. And it feels like this could also create upliftment and hope for us. I'm thinking about since the 5th session of the forum in July, when we learned about the situation with Arctic methane, and since we've been discussing near-term extinction throughout the forum, all of which seems so hopeless, I feel like this exercise that you've invited us to do can be a way for each of us to hold the polarity of hope and hopelessness in a kind of tension, just like Carl Jung describes, which opens the potential for another option, a third possibility to manifest. So I think these things are important for us as a group to do with our visualizations, to write about them and to be conscious of holding this polarity of hope and hopelessness, which can help bring about the tipping point and the miracle for the earth that we all pray for.
Yeah, I think that would be wonderful, so that we can have this collaborative holding of visions, because we're all privy to what the descent is. We're all holding that as well. But let's also hold the other side of it, She's been through 5 extinction cycles already. We know that. There is something else on the other side of this as well, and so this is the importance of keeping in mind the deep time, keeping in mind the trust in the natural cycles of things, so that we're not just feeling that we're living in the bottom of the descent cycle. There is something on the other side of the descent cycle, which is the return. You can think about it in terms of the hero's journey, or one of the myths that I love that comes out of ancient times is the myth of the goddess Inanna, where she makes a conscious decision to go into the underworld. She has to go through these 7 gates to get there. She gives up, at each gate she gives up one of her treasures, one of her powers, she enters into the underworld where she meets with her dark sister, the goddess Ereshkigal, who kills her, and she's dead for 3 days. But then help is sent, and she is reclaimed, she is brought back to life, and she's taken back up through these 7 gates. She is renewed. It's a story of the seasons of the earth. It's a story, it's the Christ story, you know, it's the hero's journey story. So I personally like to keep in mind the knowledge of these rhythms and these cycles that we know from the earth, so that we're not just realize the underworld isn't everything. You know, we know how to do our shadow work while we're there. We know that we have to at times do surrender. You know, we've been taught that by Leslie beautifully, you know. But there is always a return. And so for me, I am feeling like, and this could just be me, I don't know, but I'm feeling like Gaia is saying, at least to me, to keep in mind the bigger picture.
Yeah.
And so, yes, we are in a descent, but yes, there's also the renewal. That's why I, you know, think it's important for us to hold what the new story emerging is too, you know.
It's the dissolution and rebirth.
Right.
You can't have one without the other.
Exactly.
They're both happening. And I just
Yeah.
want to let you know we do have a few hands up, so we can take some questions if you're ready for
Sure.
that. Okay. All right. So, Chris McDonald, you have the mic.
Hi, everyone. Thank you, Kathy, for a beautiful presentation. I really enjoyed the slides and the quotes and just everything about it. It was really, really lovely. So thank you for bringing that to us.
Thank you, Chris.
And I just wanted to share something that I do that helps me just stay connected to, you know, to see the world kind of changing around us. I mean, they're logging around my house, and these are trees I've just grown to love for the 20-some years we've lived at this house, and yet they're, you know, I hear the logging equipment and the trees falling, and it really saddens me greatly that this change is occurring. And one thing I do is I do the Navajo Indian prayer of just really connecting with my Shoshuna, and doing it's the beauty prayer where, you know, it's beauty above me, beauty below me, beauty to my left and beauty to my right, beauty in front of me and beauty behind me. And I say that when I'm walking outside, and I try to do it as much as I can throughout the day, just to hold that sense of beauty, you know, which visually seems to be disappearing around me. So I just wanted to offer that. It might be helpful to others to really holding that sense of beauty, that we walk in beauty, as the Navajos taught us in the prayer. So thank you again very much, Kathy, for that presentation.
That's beautiful, Chris. Thank you so much for offering that. I think that's a wonderful practice.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you, Chris. Okay. All right. We have several more hands. So, Joan, you have the mic.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm feeling deeply emotional, and thank you so much for this presentation. I don't know what it is for me other than bringing back hope, I think. But I've been working for the last 2 years very diligently here on Kauai against, and I use the word against, and I think that's part of the problem, but working to transform the GMO companies, the chemical seed companies here on the island. And I've gotten very involved with the political part of it. And during the process, over the last 2 months, we have been put down, we being this organization that I co-created called Kauai Rising, to take some regulatory and ballot measures to get things changed on the island. And we've been put down by the county council, and we've come up against the might of the chemical companies. And I became very despondent over the last couple of months about what to do, and that recognizing that the way we've been doing things is not going to make any difference at all, going through the regulatory system, going through our governments, because we have done the same thing over and over and over again for, I don't know, at least in our country, 250, 300 years, but in the world for maybe thousands of years, because human beings seem to be in a cycle of just doing the same thing over and over, and there's small changes, but they're not making a difference. So I came to the conclusion, which I certainly have learned with you, Leslie, and everyone at Corelight, that the only thing that will make the difference is to change our consciousness. And I just thank you so much for this presentation, because it's helping me to remember to go back to Gaia and to practice some of the things that you've brought up, Kathy. Thank you very much. Because I'm pretty saddened.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that, Joan.
Totally understand your sadness, Joan. Totally understand it. What we've been talking about, and one of the reasons we started this forum, in fact, was to build motivation and consciousness in our students in order to assist with the creating of a tipping point.
Right.
I think everyone knows what tipping point means at this point, and that change can happen with the tipping point. It is possible. It seems as though it's the only option where enough of us who hold these gosh, I'm sorry, I'm quite wound up. To have enough people who really, really support the earth, that it will outweigh the craziness of the pharmaceutical and the other kinds of companies who develop weapons and armory and killer airplanes and choose to fight at every every opportunity to get what they can out of the earth, the oil, the gold, the whatever is in there, the greed. We're dealing with the greed factor, an enormous sort of blind greed that is probably has a survival as its inner root, and of course this frantic desire to survive through having enough money, enough of whatever you think you might need to survive, is actually going to destroy everything. It's not going to help anyone survive at all. So our work is to build ourselves up, each one of us, to the point where we are living in higher dimension. We are holding great purity in our motivation, in our hearts and souls, and in our actions, and in our overall intentions, which most certainly include the earth and the survival of the earth and the beauty of the earth. And hopefully, as we shift, there may not be enough of us to outweigh the other third dimensional souls who are grabbing everything. But if we shift dimensions personally, each one of us personally shifts dimensions into the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh dimensions, and many of my students have already made considerable shifts. And there are other organizations that are looking to accomplish this as well. And so one of the things we need to work on in order to help the ecology is working on ourselves, developing our spiritual capacity to shift into the fifth dimension, which is where this earth is supposedly going. We were told that by inner guides, a couple decades ago, long time, that the goal was the earth rising into the fifth dimension, where it would stabilize. It would move through the fourth and into the fifth, where it would stabilize and remain. The earth would remain stable at the fifth, but many of the people who've done this work will end up in the seventh, eighth, and so on dimensions. And a new world will be born at that time. That was the information that a number of us were given some time ago. In fact, it came through a number of times, one of them being when we were at the Blader River Canyon, Brad, Victoria, myself, and I think there were a couple of other people present, sitting on the deck in this exquisitely beautiful place where we go, where we're surrounded by animals and nature that is pristine and undisturbed in so many ways. And Gaia spoke to us and said, "Come with me. We are going to the fifth dimension." And Victoria, do you remember the wording of that? So we could share that with everybody again. I think we have already, but we could do that again.
Yeah. We do have both a recording. Some of it was recorded, and some of it before the recording started was transcribed. But
I was wondering
basically,
if you just held it in your mind and
yeah.
having.
I mean, essentially, she said, "I'm ascending," and she actually said, "Don't worry about the scars on my body." She used that phrase. Don't focus and obsess on the scars on my body, was what she was saying. I'm ascending and I'm inviting you to come along. And her message was, in order to do that, you need to give up your secular lives. And she was not saying, we realize in retrospect, she was not saying, dump your children, your job, your school, whatever. She was saying, give up your secular orientation and live aligned in your spiritual self. Give up that secular orientation. That's what you need to do, and you can come with me. And she issued that invitation beautifully, so beautifully.
It was at least 5 years ago, wasn't it?
Yep. It was it's Mother's Day. I think it was 2010. I think it was Mother's Day 2010. So
Okay.
A little over 4 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it was a while back. So, yeah. But she
Is it-
said that, and sure enough, I mean, we've watched her vibration shift so radically. And of course, as her vibration has ascended, those who are not moving along with it are feeling more and more out of sync. And that's kind of the chaos we're seeing right now.
Yes, scared people try to bolster their courage with money. And I think that, and money and weapons, because they see an enemy. somewhere. They can't maybe quite place it, or they choose an enemy. There's something to be fought over, and that's not our modus operandi at all. We're people of spirit. We don't fight. We grow. So,
Leslie, I just wanted to say, into this issue too, one of the things that Kathy said at the beginning of the presentation, it's just a slight shift in perception, but it's really critical to recognize that the fuel of this greed and a sense of needing more, and like Kathy used the addiction to shopping as an example of it, but this goes to everything, to raping the planet for resources. It's just based, that feeling of need for something outside is based on, to a large degree, that lack of connection and that experience of being fed by nature, by Gaia. So that is a way to recognize, that is a way to help people who maybe are not on any kind of spiritual journey, but to help refocus people in that direction, is a way to move beyond, as a collective, move beyond this relationship where Earth is simply a storehouse to be looted continually.
Exactly, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, falling in love with the greens and the flowers and just the exquisiteness of nature is one of the ways that you can feel yourself very and feel very safe and very uplifted in every way. I think that living in cities has, just one example, living in cities has sort of cut people off from that profound connection to nature, and force them to get into their heads, and then they start muddling everything. They don't have a clear perception of what's happening, and they make up stories, and then we're out to lunch hugely, and that's where everything goes haywire.
Well, anyway, Joan, thank you very much for bringing that up, and for inspiring Leslie to speak.
And may your battle become easier and clearer in time, and that you all find a place of rest inside yourselves. I can tell you're all very tired. That's the sense I'm getting. And maybe it's time to stop and re-strategize between all of you and see, perhaps today's presentation will help you rethink things in a new way.
Yes, thank you. I think so, and I mean, I've already stopped because that's what I was getting.
It was burnout.
And so I'm just going, okay, so how do I go forward? And so this is very helpful, this call. And I know it's about education. I know it's about helping people see the possibilities. So I just thank you all so much.
Yes, there's even more to it than that. I think you should all start talking to Gaia. Call her in and just speak.
Yes.
If you call her by name, she may or may not answer, but she will listen. And you can do your ramble, and she'll listen. And changes could begin to happen. It happen in those of us that are trying to change things. The changes could happen in our psyches, but they could also translate eventually over to the psyches of others who are still very much stuck in the third dimension. And we do really wish with all of our hearts and souls to be able to pull the third dimensional people up into higher states of consciousness where they can see the truth And being in nature does do that.
Yeah.
And so ask for help. Ask spirit and nature and Gaia and the ascended beings to help. They can't change the way things go on Earth, but they can recommend that we do certain things. They can help us see new potentials.
So, Joan, did you want to say anything else, or are
No,
you?
I have nothing more to say at this moment other than deep gratitude. Thank you, Kathy, so much. Thank you to Sophia University. I went there also. So,
Thank you, Joan.
yeah.
Thank you. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, you're in one of the most profoundly beautiful gardens of the planet. The
Yeah.
gardens, the Garden of Eden on the planet. So, okay. Anyway, we do have one more hand. So let me just take. I think there's only one more hand, unless a few more have popped up. Sue, you have the mic.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I'd just like to say one good practice that I do, and it's been really very useful from developing communication with all the different realms, was honoring all the levels every night before I go to bed. That's one of the things to do, whether it be mountains, plants, crystals, even the fairies and the gnomes, all the little people. Just go through all the levels, even the atmosphere. And the other thing I wanted to say was you don't have to do something big. You can actually, we have a little granddaughter who came over here from Africa, and her teacher was going to put her foot on a spider, and Ashley jumped up quickly and she says, "My grandpa says you mustn't do that. You must get a container, put some paper underneath and go and take it outside, because everything is life and everything is allowed to live."
Yes.
And another one was, I was fortunate to be able to do this regression with somebody, and it turned out that they found themselves, it was at the end of a time period, I can't remember now whether it was Atlantis or Lemuria, but it was one of the end of the time period. But this person found themselves shape-shifting out of a hoho. Now, a hoho is an African word for an insect. And so there's always, there's many possibilities. That's what I wanted to say.
Oh, yes. That's very interesting. Thanks, Sue.
Thanks, Sue.
Yeah. And actually, you're so right. And I think all of us have, at least those of us who hung out around Anna at all and watched her save the wasps without getting stung from the swimming pool, and various things like that. Anna Brainby. Yeah, we all are very respectful.
Picked them up with her hands out of the water.
Yeah. So, no spiders get squished around here, or red ants, or anybody. And I have relationships with all of them, and we're very respectful, and nobody gets hurt. Nobody gets hurt. So.
Yes.
Yeah. Anyway, thanks for reminding us about that, Sue. And we actually have several questions for Kathy on the
board
that people have written in. Yeah. So I'll just. Some of them are just comments thanking you. But let's see, Elizabeth Christine wanted to know, did this presentation all arise out of your study at Sophia University, I'm interested in places of study in ecopsychology. So, Kathy, that's a question from Elizabeth Christine.
No, it did not arise all out of there. I started studying ecopsychology from in my undergraduate years at Marylhurst University. So I didn't take any classes in ecopsych at Sophia in my graduate program, but I put this whole class together for them as my thesis project. So, but what allowed me to do that was the inner transformational work that I did at Sophia. So I went in there with the desire to create a class that I could teach in ecopsychology in the future. And I, went in with a beginner's mind and said, well, this is my intention, this is my visualization for the future. And then I went through, a couple of years of the program, which was very much about doing inner transformational work. And this is what emerged, was this whole project in ecopsych. So my vision was realized in that I was able to create this class. But I've been studying this material for 20 years. So, yeah.
And much affected by your experience of coming to South Africa, right, Kath?
Well, yes, that trip was big for me, as well as the trip to Tanzania, but also all the trips that I've made to Sedona, and the trip that I did to swim with the whales back in 2003. So many pilgrimages, Yeah.
Oh, beautiful.
And she also asked something about wanting to study at places, study ecopsychology. I can list a few places where it is being taught. I had looked at graduate programs myself in ecopsychology before I decided on my graduate program, but nothing really felt right to me. That was just my experience. I think I needed the transformational work of the women's spirituality program that allowed me to find my voice. It allowed me to come to this, be in this place where I could create this program.
Great. Yeah, if you'd list that, I'm sure it would be helpful for people.
I will. I'll list a few places where it's being taught. Yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. And then Nita had made a comment, and she says, I wonder if it is appropriate here to ask how many of us are participating in the going to the synchronized meditation postings to see what the focus of our love meditations are for that particular week. The more of us that participate in those weekly meditations, the more of a chance we have to create a tipping point in the areas that are receiving our energetic focus. So I think thank you, Nita, for reminding us of that, because I think if we all just take the time to make sure that we know what we're focusing on each Thursday for our synchronized meditations, it is a powerful way for us to make a significant contribution to the tipping point. So thanks for bringing that up. So I think, unless any more, let me just check to see if any other hands have gone up. Nope, and no other questions have been written in. So I think everybody is suitably uplifted from this presentation. Kathy, I just have to say thank you. It's just beautiful.
Thank you. It's such a blessing for me to be able to share all of this material, which I kind of live and breathe with every day.
Yeah.
Kathy, I'd like to ask you, if anybody listening to this call would like to get in touch with you, I know you offer private counseling sessions and all kinds of other help for people interested in eco-psychology. how would people get in touch with you?
Well, they can email me at kathystanley@comcast.net, Kathy with a K. Or I'm just in the process of having a new website built, but I do have my old website up, which is, and the URL will be the same. It's sacredwomenwisdom.com.
Indeed.
Thank you for the opportunity to let me share this with you.
We thank you for the opportunity to experience it. Thank you. All right. Well, in the spirit of our forum today, I would like to do a meditation where we go out into nature. So prepare yourself for that. Make yourself nice and comfortable, back good and straight. And let's start with some breathing. I want you to breathe right into the bottom of your lungs for a moment. Very big, deep, long in-breath. And a long, slow out-breath. Fill your lungs to capacity. And then exhale. And do 2 more of those big deep breaths. And as you exhale, make sure you do the required relaxation that gives you the uplift into the crown chakra. Feel how you can release your awareness into your crown on those long, deep out-breaths. Everything relaxes, everything goes soft. You're focused on the Sushumna, breathing up into the cave of Brahman. Now I want you to visualize, or actually if you can, journey to a place of great beauty that you know, particularly if it's somewhere in a wild place where there may be many trees, animals, maybe no animals, I don't know, but just a beautiful place. A place where you perhaps go to. Perhaps it's a place where you once visited and you never forgot. And you can actually go there when you sit down to meditate and breathe and so on, and find yourself in that place. If you don't have a special place, I want you to choose one. Either create it for yourself in this moment, or think of a beautiful place that really touched you and uplifted your spirits when you went there. Some spot on the earth. And imagine that you're sitting in that place, in the center of that place. It could be the rainforest, it could be a beach somewhere, it could be out in the African bush. I have a place that I discovered when I was in my 20s, early 20s, far away in the bush of Zimbabwe area. And I often go there in meditation. So think of a place that has touched your heart, that you still remember, and that was beautiful and special to you, and go there and continue breathing. Now look around you. Don't open your eyes. This is a created experience from the inside. Look in front and see what's there. If there's nothing there, create something. A tree, perhaps. A waterfall. A cloud bank. An animal on the horizon. And then begin to wrap around yourself the rest of this place. Pay attention to what it feels like, what it sounds like, how you feel as you listen or develop your creation. Now choose a state of consciousness that you would like to be in this place of yours. Peaceful, perhaps. Quiet. Perhaps crickets singing. What time of day is it? Gradually conjure up this place. And then I want you to feel as though you can feed this place with your love, and that the place will feed you with its profound love as well. So that you are being nurtured by this special place that you have chosen or created. Now check your physical body so that you can release all the stress that you may be holding in your body and let it go in this place where we are meditating. Your place, each of our place. Release tension from your back. From your shoulders. From your arms, your hands, the front of your chest. Allow your face to relax and become smiling. Remember, you're surrounded by this safe and beautiful space that you have created for yourself. Feel the sense of safety through your body. And allow peace to build. If you need to do some deep sighs to chase the stress out of your body, then do that. This is your place. You are entitled to be free, peaceful, happy, inspired, uplifted in this place. So use the remaining time to banish any negativity, any worries, anything that would disturb your peace, and relax and just be. Continue to let go and let go and let go. Now you may begin to feel a sense of deep, profound, higher love filling your body, so much so that it connects all the way up into the cave of Brahman. And allow the cave of Brahman to expand in the center of your head, where it sits. Now roll away the top of your head and allow the blue sky above you to fill that space in your head around the cave of Brahman. Relax your forehead, your shoulders, your thighs, your lower legs and your feet. Your arms and your hands. And notice how safe you feel, how full and how complete you have allowed yourself to be, without any worries, in a safe environment, and you can let go. I suggest keeping your awareness in the cave of Brahman and truly let go of all thought, all tension, all mental, emotional issues, and just be. No thought. Just be. You'll hear a noise in your head. It's kind of the sounds of crickets in the evening. You may hear that. I don't know if everyone will, but just listen to it. It's like sitting in the dark, listening to the crickets, without a thought in your mind, without a worry in your heart. Just be. The sound is actually more like the sound of the cicadas than crickets. Sort of a buzzing sound. But you can focus on it. Don't hurt you. Now it's time to return. And so take some big deep breaths. And relax. Allow yourself to be back in the room where you're sitting. Listen to the sounds for just a moment more. Take a couple of long, deep breaths. Bring your head down to your knees. And as you sit up, just do a last releasing of tension in the body, in the muscles. If you can maintain the silence, the crickets as well, they're there, but there's a silence and a stillness. No thought. Holding the no thought state, just begin to crack your eyes a tiny little bit so that some light comes in. Don't lose your state of poise and peace. Not yet. Crack your eyelids and become aware of the room that surrounds you. Extend your sense of peace into the room. And make a commitment that you will stay in a state of deep peace and relaxation for a while. With your eyes open, perhaps lay back on the couch or look out the window. Just keep your eyes closed if you wish. But be aware that you're in the room that you started in. The only thing that's changed is that you've become more relaxed, more centered, more in oneness. Now I'd like you to hold that as long as you can. Give yourself even 10 to 15 minutes of downtime after we disconnect our computers. Give yourself some downtime and just be with the surroundings of your room wherever you are. Be with stillness or be with the work that we did with Kathy during the forum discussion, whatever. But whatever you do, try and stay relaxed. Don't jump up and get busy just yet. Give yourself some time. Downtime seems to be something we're all needing. We're needing more than we're giving ourselves. So thank you, everyone. Enjoy your little interlude of relaxation and meditation. Be with yourself and love yourselves, honor yourselves, and extend your love to all. Thank you. My love to you. Till next time.